Hi everybody, welcome back to the show. Today we will be talking about something that's been going on now for the last couple of months. We have the Trump trial that just concluded, which we'll get into that future, and then I will also be discussing and comparing how it's being treated to the Hunter Biden trial. And then we're going to sprinkle some of the Fauci trial in there for good measure. So stay tuned, it'll be amazing. Okay, you stay tuned, cool. So, I want to start off with my opinions on the Trump trial, how everything went. So, as we all know, Trump did some things. Start by prefacing that. But he did what he was accused of, which was, for those who may not have been following the trial very well, he was proven guilty on 34 counts of whatever. Like, I've tried to look into it. I've tried to understand how the judge came to the conclusion, because it was a different setting. Typically, you need 12 jurors to agree unanimously on a verdict. Otherwise, it's called a hung jury. Well, in this special circumstance, given the fragrant and disgusting details that Stormy Daniels said on the stand, and the lackluster evidence that was presented, one might say that this trial was rigged, but I think rigged is a wrong term. I think it was a setup. And I know some people say, well, rigged is the same as a setup. It's different. So the judge in this case, Judge Merchan, made the parameters to find Trump guilty very, very vague. They only had to agree to 3 or 4 of the charges of any one of the 12 jurors to get a full guilty verdict on all 34. That's unprecedented in a legal case, from what I understand. But in this circumstance, the charges that Trump was found guilty on were simply misdemeanors, and I'll give him that. Trump did commit some financial wiggling that could be misconstrued as, how should we say, borderline illegal, definitely unethical, and it definitely could have been a misdemeanor, but definitely not felonies. But that's not what the judge wanted. Everybody involved in the Trump case ran and got elected on the promise of their constituents that they would, and when I say that, I mean the New York State Attorney General, all of the District Attorney of New York City. These people were elected with the mindset and the goal to convict Donald Trump, and they got their conviction. They found him guilty of a, quote, felony, tax, business swindling, using campaign assets to pay off a porn star, which, by the way, and I know this is like a broken record, I'm sure if you're listening to my channel you've already heard this on others, but that alone is not a felony if you were to go that route. Mismanagement of campaign funds is a misdemeanor in most circumstances. The thing that I believe Trump was hoping for was that he would get a fair trial, which that was not going to happen in New York City. New York City is as blue as a choked out baby. Okay, it's not going to be fair. Any blue city where Trump is getting indicted or in court, he was not going to get a fair trial. But some could say he would not get a fair trial if he was, say, in a red city, because it would be overwhelming favoritism. I still think that would have been more fair than what he got in New York. And so, as a result, he was found guilty and is now a convicted felon. And the left side of the aisle, Democrats, radical progressives will all use this going into the election period, which is coming up, and say that, oh, you're voting for a convicted felon. Well, he would not be a convicted felon if it was not for everybody trying to go after him since he was elected. Not even since he was elected, since he announced his running for campaign. Because all these cities used to love him. I mean, Trump operated out of New York City for years, 20, 30 years, out of Trump Tower. All of his networks, all of his business networks, all of his business dealings were all done in New York City. So, but it's amazing to see as soon as he decides to no longer be a Democrat, he says, hey, screw that, I'm not running for I've been a Democrat all my life, and now I don't agree with the party, so I'm going to choose the only other successful party to go to and run. He did. But with that said, now let's talk about the future of Trump. What is he actually going to face? Well, there's a lot here that could happen, and honestly, I think he's gonna actually get some jail time, and it may not be in an actual prison. They may actually say he has to serve it in a homestead somewhere away from the population, which would be great, honestly, if you were a fan of Biden or anybody in the Democrat Party right now, because it gets Trump out of the public eye. Because when you look at him versus Biden, and I will allude this to politics the entire time, because there's no way this case was not politically driven. It was politically driven simply because, like I stated earlier, everybody in New York City and New York State ran with the idea of, we're going to indict Biden, Trump, and they were all of the Democrat establishment. It's just a fact. You can look that up. You can look up which way all these politicians voted. You can hear their own words. I'm not going to elaborate on that, but Trump's going to see jail time simply because, and I believe that he's going to get a fine. I believe he's going to get a fine, which I don't know what that dollar amount would be, but they would have to go. It's Trump. They're going to go after him financially, and two, he is going to serve whatever jail time they can for it. Unless, which leads me to my second point, unless he actually has some allies in the criminal justice system, which is hard to see nowadays, but there's plenty of political analysts and legal analysts out there that are saying, well, appeal could be made, but he's appealing to a court in New York State. It would take a higher appeal. We're talking like Supreme Court level, which could be a double-edged sword. They could, considering that most of the Supreme Court right now are conservative-leaning, Republican-leaning, and some of them were put up there by Donald Trump. But we have to keep in the back of our heads, the whole purpose of the Supreme Court is to be a neutral party and only interested in setting forth laws and legal standings that benefit all of society. So in my personal conviction, I hope that the Supreme Court steps in because of the way the court was handled, the way the judge set the standards, and just simply the way that it flowed. Like, we have testimony of people coming in there giving information that was, for one, not needed by the case, and two, they were there simply to stir up dirt. Like Stormy Daniels, the other chick whose name I don't even remember, but these girls that he had affairs with and paid off, they were inconsequential. Like, they had nothing to do with the actual transactions going on. If anything, they profited from it, were given NDAs and paid money to keep their mouth shut, which makes me question if they are now in violation of their NDA, so the court could be... Anyway, that's not going to happen. So the main person of interest in this case, as much as we all want to say it's Donald Trump, he's the guy they're going after. So he's obviously a person of interest. But the other side is a lawyer named Michael Cohen, who is his lawyer and attorney for years leading up to the Trump campaign and kind of during the Trump campaign. And that man's just a piece of shit. He worked for the Trump family, helped them through a lot of their legal fee or legal issues going through buying and selling businesses, buying, selling properties, which was what Trump does. And the only thing he could take him to court over was this one small thing that was technically a misdemeanor that they pushed up. And this is something I don't think anybody's really talked about, is the fact that Michael Cohen did a lot of legal things for Trump over the years. And if he was really this corrupt, devious businessman who was doing secret shady deals behind closed doors with Russia and all of them, you would think his go-to lawyer at the time would know about all this stuff. But that's not what he's going to court over. He's going to court over paying money to a whore so his wife doesn't find out. Just to me, that seems like a little piece of circumstantial evidence. But let's go back to Michael Cohen here, because he is also not the most reliable eyewitness in all this, that they really kind of just glance over in the courtroom. There's a time where he's sitting up there on the pedestal, or at the bar, I should say, and he's starting to say all this stuff, but then Trump's lawyers come out and start asking him questions that are pretty damning to his character. Like, he's embezzled money from the Trump family. Simply glanced over. We're just not going to... I wonder if he's going to face any legal charges for that, because he said yes to that during the trial. But then, when originally asked in court years ago at this point about the same situation, he said no to it. So he perjured himself on the stand. And how that was not brought into question is, like, weird to me, personally. So yeah, the Trump trial is over. Trump's either going to jail with a fine, or he's going to get very heavily fined, which would be the least likely, which would be the best case scenario if anything comes of that. Or the extreme best case scenario, Supreme Court steps in, does the appeal process, he gets free. Now, I'm no lawyer. I never went to school for lawyer. I have a history degree, which we talked a little bit about legalese and that kind of stuff when I was there, but that's neither here nor there. So, in conclusion, for that trial, I'm voting for Trump in November, even with the legal case. Now moving on to the next big trial that's going on, and this is relatively new. Like, this is, as of today, new. But it's been brewing for a while. It's been fermenting. Because the longer it sat, the more questions were being asked, the more eyes were on it because it got brought out to the public. The Hunter Biden gun charge case, which you would think, gun charge, it's whatever. But Joe Biden himself stood on the stand and said that justice had been done because of the political persecution of Donald Trump. And that's exactly what it was. He said that the rule of law stands, and anybody that questions that rule of law is an insurrection, or whatever he said at that point. It's Joe Biden rambling, okay? He tries to act all serious by squinting his eyes, and it's a real joke. I'm curious to see how this one ends, because it started off with a year or so ago, Hunter Biden was found out to, for one, he went and purchased a firearm illegally and lied about the paperwork and said he was not on drugs, never been in contact with them, to purchase a relative, in my opinion, a very mediocre revolver. He bought a Colt Cobra 38 special. It's an revolver. It's not a Smith & Wesson by any stretch of the imagination, but they look pretty. Illegally purchasing said revolver he took it home and, being the crackhead that he is, left his girlfriend at the time, Haley Biden, and no, they're not related. It's his dead brother's wife, so it'd make him his ex-sister-in-law that he's now sleeping with. Weird, but you know, it's political family. They always have some weird stuff going on. Don't take my word for it. Go look to your favorite news station, because I'm sure they're talking about it, or there's some shows on YouTube that have already talked about it. I won't name names because I'm not paid for by them, but the point is, Biden's a 60-year-old crackhead that illegally purchased a firearm, and the Biden family was going to sweep it under the rug. Biden used his executive position to try to make it go away in his DOJ. And a couple whistleblowers came out and said, well, no, we can't do that. This is too serious of a case. And then after denying that, they went to the media and told the media. So now something had to be done about it. So now this court started, and it's a little early to predict how it's going to end, but I have a pretty safe prediction. I think Hunter Biden will see jail time. And if I'm wrong, then I have less faith in the Democratic Party and their way of doing things than I would be scared to admit. The fact that they just railroaded Trump into a felony conviction based off of a misdemeanor charge is bad enough. But then to have the president's drug addict son, who, you know, sleeps with, like, he pretty much sleeps with hand in hand in Ukraine, sleeps with Chinese businessmen, like, and has his father on phone calls with, making some big, like, policy changing business deals overseas, walk on something that any one of us would be like, if I got arrested for a gun charge, I would have my whole collection taken away from me. My family would have to, like, pretty much promise that they were not going to give me a firearm. I would get some jail time, like, that's guaranteed, unless I get a good lawyer. Then it's a series of fines. But even then, he'd have to be a damn good lawyer. And just the social ramifications of that are, at least in my friend group, would be terrible. But I'm a common man. You see, I'm a common white man in America. Just about middle class. I would have the book thrown at me and be in jail before the end of the week. This Hunter Biden case has been brewing for a year or so, just sitting in the waves. And I just think it's funny that now, after the Trump conviction, I think the whole Biden case is going to be to save face. I think Hunter's going to jail, and Biden's going to use this as a political piece to say, yeah, the justice system is perfectly legal. And see, even my own son, though I couldn't help him, I didn't try to help him, even though, you know, he's been over to the Biden house with him almost all week, and him and his whole family have been, like, planning this, how they're going to get out of this for the last 2 weeks, which I think is funny. But the fact that it's happening now, after the Trump case, is just evidence to me that he's going to jail, and it's to save face with people who think that Trump was the only political person in the eyes, so to speak, of the DOJ, Department of Justice, for those who don't know. There's no way that Biden is going to walk on these charges. And I'm sure they're going to use the drug addict state that he was in. I'm sure they're going to try to find a way to swipe Haley under the rug and find a way to blame her for it. because she technically was the one that took the gun out of the house and dumped it in a trash can in front of a grocery store. So if Hunter Biden does not go to jail, then two things are going to happen. Either Haley's going to jail, or it's going to go back to the gun shop owner who he bought the firearm for not doing a rigorous enough check for. So when you buy a firearm, you fill out what's called a 4473. It's a document where you answer yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, to a series of questions, legal questions like, have you ever been to prison? Do you do drugs? Have you ever been convicted of a felony with a firearm? And it's an easy enough sheet to fill out, but it's in depth. Like, anything you need to know about a criminal background is answered on that sheet if the person answers it honestly. Those forms get sent to the local ATF office for them to review and double check. So if Hunter Biden was able to buy this revolver and actually acquire it, that means the gun shop owner had to have been in contact with the FBI legally. And if that happened and the ATF came back and just did a blanket slate, okay, you're good on the gun charge, and they did it because they saw the last name Biden, they didn't even bother to check the paperwork. Because in the modern world, that's all done electronically. You go to your gun store, they have a tablet, you fill out all the questions on the tablet, and then for a guy like me, I've got a clean record. I get my answer back in about 15-20 minutes, long enough for me to look through the store, find some more ammo, maybe see another gun I might be interested in purchasing at a later time. That's how it's done. The scary part would be is if the ATF allowed this to happen simply because they saw the last name Biden on there and didn't want to make any waves about it. That would be a crucial thing to ask in the trial coming forward. I would love to see the gun shop owner on trial, on the stand. I would also like to see the local ATF agent who approved the 4473. That's if I don't see those two people on the stand, then I'll know that either A, he's not going to jail, clearly, and that the gun shop owner is going to jail. That's what's going to determine that for me. And lastly, we're going to talk about the Fauci case, and people on my side of the aisle, people with my, not even on, you don't even have to be on my side of the aisle. If anybody that went through COVID as a middle class working person would love to see, has been waiting to see this trial since day one. A lot of people's way of lives were pretty much altered and altered, I'll say, because of Fauci. And I know I heard a little bit of the court today. I saw he tried to blame the CDC for a lot of the questions. He turned back to the CDC said this, the CDC said that. But I was alive during COVID. Anybody watching this right now, you included, also remember him being on the news every day, saying, I'm working with the CDC. Sorry, I can't do as good of an impression as Michael Knowles can. The point is, he can't lie on the stand here, because we all remember him on the TV screen saying, I'm working with the CDC, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Me and the CDC, we came together and thought that 6 feet apart is a good thing. Well, I'm glad to see he's finally being for his actions, because the fact is he lied. All right, the whole six. So I can start off by, let's take a step back through history. This is where I come in. In the 1910s, early 1920s, mid 1920s, there was influenza breakout everywhere. And if you read your history, if you go back and look up the history of influenza and stuff like that, you'll see they did very similar things that we did for COVID. They would They wore masks. You don't, and at that time they didn't want to share that there was an influenza out. I mean, you had every once in a while the scary headline, more people died, but you didn't see pictures of it in the newspaper. Like when I was going through the history of how we handled flu outbreaks in the past, there were a couple magazines that had pictures of it. You saw some where you could see people wearing weird looking masks, but they only covered the mouth. One thing they actually did that we didn't do, thank God, was the invention of what we now call Listerine mouthwash was invented as a way to kill the flu virus. And they would force kids to do that before they entered school, and not too much unlike people checking your COVID card before you could enter a building. Something else they used to do, and this is where I'm gonna start Fauci's lies. During the influenza breakout, people it wasn't like there weren't signs anywhere, there weren't anything, but it would be in the media, in the newspaper, saying, "We suggest you stand 6 feet apart away from somebody." And that science came from a legitimate science, and that's 6 feet is the most that saliva, when you talk, when you spit, that's the furthest it reaches, whether it be nanoparticles or whatever. 6 feet apart, or 6 feet is the max in which saliva travels. Well, for those who didn't know, coronavirus is an airborne virus. You breathe it in. It's not, you don't necessarily need it for direct contact. Just saying, like that was not, this whole 6 feet thing was unnecessary. Now, masking could have been. The studies that were done in the 1910s and 20s on the whole masking thing were not very well reported. And the ones that we did in 2020 to 2022, we'll never know whether they're the truth or not because of what we're seeing now. Fauci lied about so many things, and we all called it back then. We were like, there's no way this guy has the most up-to-date studies on this stuff, because the virus had literally just broken out, and then somehow they came up with these spontaneous mandates that would help you with your health and stuff and help protect you against it. And I don't know. It just seems like if they told you, oh yeah, the masking was effective, which come to find out it wasn't. Masking did nothing for these people because COVID was an airborne virus. So let's start there. On trial, he was asked about where did these mandates come from? Like, and he could have, if he was not such an arrogant, self-interested hack, he could have dug a little deeper, did some research, found some excuse, like say, well, in the 1910s, we found that people masked up and were recommended to do this because, you know, for their health and stuff. And if it worked for that, we could make the case that it works for coronavirus, because it is a coronavirus, much like the flu, just with a different form of transportation. The interesting thing is, he didn't say that. He didn't even pretend to have a educated answer behind it. He just said, it just kind of came, like word for word, it just came to us. It was a mutual conversation with that as the end result. To me, it sounds like you made it up. Now, the second interesting part, which I already alluded to earlier, was during the trial he was asked multiple times, well, why did you okay this? Why did you okay that? How did you okay any of this? And his answer was, well, you'll have to talk to the CDC about that. That was a CDC decision. Well, newsflash, dude, you were you were the face of the CDC during this time period. There's no way these guys did anything without your knowledge, unless that's all you were. Unless that was all that you were. You were a face that was famous in the 80s for your debacle with the AIDS disease. And they knew that people would recognize you, and the Democrat-leaning populace out there would recognize you as the hero of the gays. Unless that's all you were, which probably chances are highly, you had some say in what the virus or what the mandates were going to be, even though they came from the CDC. You were at the helm, man. Like the CDC's the boat. You're driving the damn thing. Okay? There's no way you can't just say, oh, well, you're going to have to reference that to the CDC. So, again, another lie. And the last and final thing I want to talk about from the trial is the stance he took on the lab leak theory that all of us conspiracy theorists were told was not true. He was the first one to sit there and say it came from a bat out of China. Well, and he was very vocal about it at the time. He was very much like us conspiracy theorists were dangerous because we weren't by us accusing China of a lab leak, which he owned the lab, by the way. Well, I shouldn't say he owned. He worked in partnership and sent several checks to the lab via multiple types of communication that were not authorized by the Global Health Society. Interesting to note. That's another interesting thing I would just say, but it ties into this lab leak theory. So the point of the lab leak theory was that some of us did our research. Some of us were like, well, this virus is too well engineered to be a natural virus. Because if it was just a normal coronavirus, not COVID-19, there's all kinds of, for reference, there's all kinds of COVID. There's obviously 19, I think it's up to 24 different strands of coronavirus now. And occasionally, labs will create viruses to fight them. And us conspiracy theorists at the time were told, hey, no, you're wrong. This was not a lab leak. Just because there was a medical lab in Wuhan where the virus originated from doesn't mean it was a lab leak. It came from that wild bat that somebody ate. No. This week on the stand, he had the balls to get up there and say, he was asked, so what was the origin of the virus? He was told, well, it's complicated. And then he responded with, or the questioner, I can't remember who was questioning him at the time, asked, was it a lab leak? Today, in court, he said, well, it could have been a lab leak, and did not further elaborate. Instead went into some gobbledygook about how it's complicated. It's a complicated question. No, sir, no. Those of us who question these mandates, those of us who were ostracized by our neighbors, those of us who were, I can't even begin, demonized, essentially told we were murderers if we walked out of the house without a mask, if we didn't sit 6 feet apart. Those of us who were in that situation, you called us murderers on TV. And you made our neighbors so afraid of this damn virus that, I'll share a personal story. I was not, for the first couple weeks of COVID, actually a couple months of COVID, I was not allowed in my ex-girlfriend's house because her mom was so afraid of the coronavirus and the fact that I wouldn't get vaxxed because, for one, I have a heart condition. Two, I didn't know anything about this virus. It's not like going to CVS and getting your yearly flu vaccine that's been tried and true every year. This was a brand new shot that just magically came out of nowhere, and you guys were apparently able to perfect the shot in a year, which, come to find out, actually I'll get to that. This isn't my last point. I'll get to that in a minute. You owe us answers, sir. I won't even dignify you by calling you sir. Anthony. I'm not even calling you doctor. Anthony, you owe us answers, because I know for a fact there are several suicides that are probably on your hands, because we humans are social creatures. We are. That's why we live the way we do. We like being in groups. We like talking to people. We like talking. We like congregating. That is a main part of human nature, is group activity. And you killed that for people slip of the tongue. You kept people from doing that for almost 2 years. Strictly for a year. I'll give you that. For a strict year, we were not allowed to gather with our families. We were not allowed to go to other people's houses. We were not allowed to go to the grocery store. We could not go to church normally because of you, Anthony. During this time, you said you could only go out, or apparently I remember this on you saying this on live TV. It was okay for the protesters to go out and protest and ruin people's lives, burn down places, be absolute menaces to the common good society that we had before COVID, because protesters and rioters were wearing face masks, while us normal law-abiding citizens had to sit in our homes and just watch our neighbors' business burn, or end up having to go into bankruptcy because he couldn't do business there anymore. It's your fault. Now, going back to what I said I would talk about, because this was brought up today too, the shot. He said on TV, time and time, probably 2-3 times a week, go get your COVID shot. It's 100% effective. And if you don't get the shot, you're as responsible for the deaths coming as COVID. He said those words. I remember that ad on TV. In court today, he was asked, how would you rank the effectiveness of the shot? His response to that question was, well, it's a complicated matter. How is it complicated, sir? You went on TV saying this thing was 100% effective, and that it is incredibly safe. It's tried and true. Like, we tested it, blah, blah, blah. It's perfectly safe for everybody. My grandmother is suffering right now because of your shot. She's having heart attacks. And even her own doctors have come back and said it could be because of the coronavirus shots. And there's more of them coming. We have perfectly healthy 25-year-olds, athletes, people who are obviously in good shape, keeling over dead from heart attacks. And everyone's, the media's trying to cover your ass too. They're over here saying, well, this happens often, it's just not reported. Then why are you reporting it now? If it never happened before, why is it getting reported now? After the shots come out, after all this. It's not because it's always happened before. Perfectly healthy athletes don't fucking have heart attacks on the field during a fucking football game every day. That's not normal. It's because you, Dr. Fauci, and I'm sorry, listeners, I directed my anger towards you. This is a very sore topic for me. Dr. Fauci swore up and down this thing was safe. And he forced every college to take the shot. I'm so glad I was out of college by then, because I would have not been allowed to take classes. I would not have been allowed to participate in campus activities unless I had the vaccine. College level athletes, according to the NCAA, had to be vaxxed in order to play, even if they played at all. A number of suicide cases were because athletes lost their scholarship during COVID, because once they went back to play, they were not the same level. They were not the same. You kept them locked up for a year, and then you expect them to go play again, and they weren't good anymore, so they would lose their scholarship. They lost everything because of Anthony Fauci. And he went on court. He's sitting there in trial, swearing up and down, well, it's a complicated matter, and you got to follow the tracks, you got to look at the data, and it was sometimes effective. It was a case-to-case scenario, is what he said. Well, I hope this trial, again, I know it's turmoil of politics this today and age, but I hope you have what's coming to you, because my grandmother might die because of you. And that hurts. You locked us up. You kept us away from our families during some important times. There were several funerals that some friends of mine couldn't go to and they died of COVID, They couldn't go to the funerals because you wouldn't let them. You shut their church down. How can a family member have a funeral service if they can't even go into the church? The least you could do is be honest. Honest with yourself, honest with us on the TV screen. That would be nice. And I think that does it for this. So, like I said, this was my feedback or my reaction to the last 3 major trials that we had this year, or these last couple months, and foreseeable future. Hope you all enjoyed it. Sorry I got a little heated in that last one, but I think you all share my frustration with that one. So, thank you. I should have another episode coming out in about 2 weeks. Got some new toys to play with, so we'll see how that goes. And again, thank you for watching. Stay strong. Watch your six.